Welcome to the Foundry, where leaders are forged daily. Each week, we investigate themes of leadership, entrepreneurship, and mindset with some of the greatest minds in real estate. And now, the data scientist of real estate, George Roberts.
Welcome back, entrepreneurs. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Larry Dorfman, founder and CEO of 𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐵𝐶 Holdings. Larry led the company from its inception to its IPO 4 years later in 1988 through its purchase in 1999 by Ford Motor Company. Then in 2007, with the help of Stone Point Equity Partners, he purchased 𝐿𝐴𝐵𝐶 Holdings once again. Larry finally retired in 2019. Not long after, his son Daniel came to him with a new idea to help others succeed through empowering 1 million people to build wealth through real estate. Welcome to the show, Larry.
Thanks for having me, George. It's good to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. And, you know, what I love about your story is that you're one of those people who just can't retire.
Yeah, I think most of my friends have said I've failed miserably at the endeavor. Although the first year and a half was pretty fun. You know, there was a pandemic going on, which I hate to have too much fun during a pandemic, but taking some time off, not traveling 200 days a year, and having Daniel actually and his family move into the house with us while he was redoing a house. With construction so slow, with 9 months of them in the house. And there is how the result of me failing at retirement happened. As he was speaking to me about roots and what we're doing, his idea compelled me to get engaged.
Awesome. So why don't you pick up the story there? So he pitches the idea of roots, and what was that idea, and what are you actually doing to help 1 million people achieve financial freedom?
Yeah, so Daniel's been in real estate for about 13 years. They started their mission together, he and his wife, to help people buy their first homes, you know, sort of get started and everything else. And needless to say, prior to 6-8 months or so ago, although houses kept getting more expensive, interest rates were easy. So for a long time, they were able to help people get in their homes. And the first thing Daniel said to me that people would say to him is, hey, now I want to get a rental property, and I want to get one rental property, then I'll have two, and then I'll have five. And there are certainly many, many success stories along that line. But as Dan said, so many of them didn't understand what it would take to do that. You know, getting the down payment together, getting a loan for the property against the one income stream that you have, because the potential income stream of the property isn't going to cover that first house. You know, the bank doesn't really look at that. So all those challenges. So Daniel's first thought process was how to democratize real estate in a different way and make it available to everybody, not just accredited investors, but non-accredited investors as well. And as we sat around a dinner table literally for 9 months, and another partner, Scott Jacobson, joining us in these conversations, we started to look at where really the opportunities are, which usually is wherever the challenges are. Does that make sense? I mean, if you can identify where the problems and pain points are in the environment, in the economic environment, and in real estate, in this particular case, then you can start to look at the opportunities. And they are that, other than the 10% of accredited investors, very few non-accredited investors grow their wealth in real estate because they can't get the starting point. They can't get that entry point. And there are several different funds out there that allow people in for a portion or a small piece or whatever, but they're quite different than this. What it evolved to, I would say, is that how do we not just help the investor invest, but how do we also solve a problem in affordable renting, affordable living, and the wealth gap that exists in the United States? So it's a weird combination of a commercially motivated and community-inspired fund. And here's where the answer came in. Let's talk about the people who actually pay the bills, the ones who pay the rent every month, who never get to participate. And if you're a workforce housing making 50, 60, 70,000 a year, what are the chances, George, now of them buying their first home anytime in the near future?
Yeah, pretty small. For most people, that's where they're at, just maybe one paycheck away from not being able to pay the rent.
Yeah, thank you for the lead in. It was like we actually practiced this. We didn't. We call that fringe homeless. Mm-hmm. The average renter in America makes about $60,000, $65,000 in the household, and at the end of the day has very little expendable income at the end of a month, and the average total lifetime savings of those renters is just at $650. As you said, just enough money to maybe pay for one serious problem or small problem, but not a serious one, and just a step from not being able to pay the bills. So Daniel kept evolving this as we talked along, and he said, what if we actually include the residents and let them invest in the fund? Okay, what are they going to invest with? Well, typically workforce housing residents who rent put a security deposit up, right? The only problem is that they put it up as part of the cost of getting a home. They never get it back. I mean, by never, I mean 80, 85% of the time, the landlords will find a reason not to pay that security deposit back. By the way, most of the time, the resident gives them a good reason not to pay it back. They don't take care of the property. Let's be real on both sides. So Daniel said, what if the resident actually was a partner and they lived in the property like they owned it, and we taught them how to do that, and they had a stake in the game? Would they take better care of it, pay their rent on time better, stay longer, which actually helps very much on your rental returns, right? And then build wealth while they're there. So that's the model we started to build, and which we have now proven with Roots. So when I say proven it, the resident who moves in a Roots apartment takes their deposit, rental reserve we call it, and they can actually invest it. Let's say it's a $1,300 rental. They can invest the $1,300 right into the fund, make the same returns as every other investor made. In 2022, that was 16%. So they can make the same returns where they've never gotten a dime in interest on their security deposit. Now, if they'll pay their rent on time every month, be a good neighbor, live with people who live nearby nicely, don't have the police called, et cetera, and once a quarter, just take a video real quick, let us know what needs to be done in the property, show us anything that needs work, and show us you're taking care of it. We actually give them a rental rebate. Averages, it's a minimum usually of $50 a month, so $600 a year. You take that $1,300 renter who gets $600 in rental rebate, they're at $1,900, and they earn 10, 15%. Last year it was 16. They earn 15%, let's say. Well, they're sitting over $2,000 in real savings in their bank. Online, they can look at it, see it on their platform, watch it grow. They can add to it if they want to. And so now all of a sudden they're building wealth. Does this make sense?
Absolutely. And so much that I like about that model. And the first thing is that it's a little contrarian, right? I mean, you're breaking a lot of the rules of what you might call the conventional wisdom of being a landlord. First of all, that you don't want these people to make any repairs or fix anything, right? I mean, there got to be a lot of ground rules there to make sure. Don't fix the roof. Don't make that your quarterly contribution.
Well, let's be clear. We don't want them fixing anything. If you got a light bulb out in the oven and you could change it, that'd be great, because we don't have to spend $150
right,
through property management to go over there. We did, it's such a funny thing you say that, we did have a resident replace their own toilet. And he said, I didn't need a new toilet. I've been there since before y'all bought this property, and it was old. And a buddy of mine had toilets, so I took his toilet and put it in. And of course, Daniel, being the experienced one in real estate, said, oh my God, you did not. And he immediately sent our crew over to make sure the thing was put in right, not leaking. Now we're talking about by taking care of the property. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy when a renter that doesn't expect to get their security deposit back, and they have a kid, and the kid stains the floor or makes it dirty, right? Drop something on the carpet, something happens. They've already written off that security deposit. They quit caring about the property in general. So if the kids are writing on the walls, who cares? If they're banging things up, who cares? But a resident who sees their wealth growing every quarter, who is communicated with on a regular basis, literally every single month, reminded that they're building wealth, and then educated to understand how to live in it like they own it, well, they'll pay their rent on time, number one. Number two, what we ask them when they do the video is more to look for things like, if you see a dark spot in the bathroom, that might be a small water leak. Make sure we know about it. We'll come fix it, because that's $150, $200 to fix now, and $5,000 to do mold abatement on sometime in the future. So think about them really looking for things to tell us to take care of. So being our eyes in the property, that helps. That makes them valuable to us. That $50 a month in rental rebates a lot less than we'd spend in turn costs at a later date. Now, we've been in almost 2 years. Our turn cost is 1/3 of what our typical turn cost was on properties when we didn't have engaged residents. We were spending in Atlanta about $3,300 to turn.
I think a lot of landlords, their ears are perking up at this point.
Yeah, wake up out there, because if your residents are engaged, then you can then have, instead of spending $3,000, $4,000, turn in, maybe you spend $1,000. We had a young man live in one of our properties. And when he left, the turn cost was $200, the cleaning fee. It was spotless and perfect. And he had come in with about a $1,500 deposit and left with $2,800 in his hand. And the only reason he left is he had to move for a new job in another city. We don't have enough longevity to tell you people are going to stay 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 years within our residential community in Atlanta. We have about 110 doors now. So people can move in and out. Let's say you got a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, and you decide you need an extra bedroom or an extra bathroom. Well, you can look at the inventory, see when the next one's going to come available. And if you want to move into another Roots property, you move with no cash because your account already exists. As we build that platform in Atlanta and continue, we're going to stay here for the first Roots 1 and Roots 2 funds, which will be about 800 homes, 1,200 to 1,400 doors. There's going to be this platform where people can move in and out, find a better property, downsize if they need to, but keep their money working for them the entire time.
That's great. And, it reminds me about the other day, I was looking at lease options and thinking, wow, what a great way to get people to feel a sense of ownership in the property and some genuine ownership too. But look at what you've done. You've actually created a new model here, a different way to allow people to create some fractional ownership. And the other thing I was thinking when I was looking into lease options is, well, you can't apply that to apartments unless you're doing, like, say, a apartment to condo conversion, right?
Well, that's not true because I think everybody who hears this, George, you wouldn't be the first person who thinks, oh, they're getting a piece of the home they live in. No, this isn't Arrived Homes or some of the others where you get a part of a home. Like in some of those platforms, 1,000 people own a $400,000 home, right? Mm-hmm. They own some little piece. They also own all the repairs and maintenance on that home. So they own their piece of a roof, their piece of an air conditioner. So to differentiate significantly, the resident doesn't only own a little piece of their home, they own a little piece of everything in the fund, everything in there. So from an investment vehicle, Roots is very different. There's no fee to invest. Mm-hmm. If you keep your investment for 1 year, which will put you in capital gains perspective, right? There's no fee to divest. Mm-hmm. Every quarter, any individual member can liquidate up to $100,000 worth of stock. Mm-hmm. So it's more liquid than most REITs, more liquid than almost any real estate investment I've certainly ever had. And then the last thing we do to help protect, well, there's 2 other things to protect the investment. Because look, when you invite non-accredited investors to join you, you want to have a more stable sort of de-risked fund, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So there's no charge for them. It costs them nothing to come in, not a penny more. It costs other investors, we have over 300 investors already with $11 million raised. It costs them nothing to come in. Whether you put $100 in, which is the minimum, or right now the minimum will be $1.2 million. It doesn't matter. There's no investment fee. There's no management fee. There's not a waterfall where a GP is going to take the top end off of it after you get the first 10, 12%. So it's a real democratized fund. Secondly, no property goes into Roots Real Estate Investment Community Trust, the fund, that isn't fully rented to an occupant who has already been living in it like they own it for a minimum of several months.
Right.
And which is not producing a 6% cash on cash. And that's with no leverage. So there, with no leverage on it, it's producing 6%. You've got a cash flow machine.
Right.
Okay. Lastly, repairs. The typical reserve that is put aside to make sure you can repair and fix things and so forth is fine within any portfolio. But in this portfolio, to make sure that there were no risks to the reserves, those reserves are paid to the sponsor company, which is also the property management. And all repairs for all maintenance and unexpected repairs are paid for by that reserve fund. And if it goes over, there's no charge to Roots.
So you went over, I think, the first very important thing between this and an ordinary syndication. You're not just bringing people into unstabilized properties. As you mentioned, you have many protections in place. But what are some of the legalities surrounding this? So you are allowing, it's kind of like crowdfunding in that you're allowing very small investors, small amounts. What sort of things are your lawyers forcing you to do to make sure that this is all kosher?
Well, that's such a great question. Crowdfunding is one thing, and I believe fully in crowdfunding. There's so many great aspects to it, and fundraising for particular companies and so forth. We went a different direction. we went ahead and filed with the SEC as a Reg A corporation.
Mhm.
As a Reg A fund, we are a privately held REIT that is regulated by the SEC as a Reg A fund, which allows non-accredited investors to invest. Because we wanted to, first of all, you were reading a bit of my background. We were publicly held from 88 to 99 until Ford bought us. And I like the compliance of a publicly held company. I like the diligence. I like the oversight. You know, I've had outside board members all of my career, and I like input from outside. As one great speaker said, you never reach your full potential without outside influence. You need those outside influences. So one of the beautiful things is people can go right to our EDGAR page at the SEC and watch every single filing. And when I tell you, George, it's more expensive and a bigger challenge to be compliant as a Reg A company because the SEC is protecting non-accredited investors than it was to be public. Considerably more challenging.
Interesting.
And it's expensive. We have to have full audit by a third-party, registered accountant handling that, and we have that. And we have to do a mid-year audit that's not quite as stringent, but pretty strong. And you have to show all the way along, every time you buy or sell a property, every time you change a property management agreement, anything you do has to be registered and filed with the SEC on your EDGAR page. It just costs a lot more money. But being able to do it is the basis upon which we will go help 1 million people build wealth, because along with all that we're doing here, we're building a platform on the seed side to manage this investment, to let people go right on the website at investwithroots.com, and anybody can go on investwithroots.com and literally invest as low as $100, as much as $100,000 on the platform, or as much as I said, $1 million if they want to just register and ACH some money. That platform will turn that in about 8 minutes right now. And we will cut that to 4 in about 3 weeks as we make a few changes and continue to build what we call the happy trail to the investment. The idea is to open this investment everywhere. We've done almost no marketing, a little bit of social media, a couple of newsletters, a podcast or two. Most of it has been word of mouth, people sharing it with other people. And we expect that once we open this marketing up and start to put marketing dollars behind it, we're going to find a whole lot of people who are interested in being in real estate without all the liabilities, without all the responsibilities. And, that's where we're headed.
Okay, great. Just one more about the process. My understanding is then you're buying these properties with your larger investors, stabilizing them, optimizing them, and then you're selling them to the fund when they're completely stabilized and de-risked.
That's close. So Seed Invesco is a company that we started to buy the properties in and to manage, be the sponsor for Roots and manage it. There are 30 investors in Seed. And basically we buy property. We have a very specific and very diligent and very careful way of buying property. We average buying that property during the high market in Atlanta at about 18% below market, below appraised value. Now we're paying about 25% below because properties are becoming more available, which is great. We are able to get them ready, what we call fully optimize them, where they're rented, paying rent, everything's stable. As you said, stabilize them. And the first 31 properties that went into Roots were at an average of 11.7% below the appraised value at the moment. Mm-hmm. So what you have there is a built-in appreciation, right? And when you go to figure your net asset value per share, you have a built-in appreciation that's already there. Mm-hmm. Okay, we don't expect properties to increase by 11% a year. That game is over for a while, pretty sure. We're going back down to our pro formas reading 3%. But if you can buy 11, 12, 13% below market with a fully rented property, you've built an asset already, right? You've built more net asset value already. So, the next 17 properties will go in at about 18% below the appraised value at the time they go in this quarter.
And then in terms of unit size, I understand you're generally buying smaller multifamily like duplexes, triplexes.
Yeah, anything 5 or under in Georgia is considered single family, actually. So all but one of our units currently, we have an 8-unit property. All of them are 5 or less. Mm-hmm. Many single family homes that have 2 units in them, that have an upstairs and downstairs unit, they are not shared internally, but it's a shared property as if a duplex would be shared. And we like that because you got 2 income streams, right? You get, instead of 1, you have 2. And if you need $2,400 worth of rent and a 3-2 upstairs and a 2-1 downstairs, if it was a standalone 3-2, you'd need $2,400, which is about the average rent for a 3-2 in Georgia, in Atlanta. But what if you can rent that one for $1,900 and downstairs for $1,100, and you got $3,000 from 2 income streams?
Right.
Well, you exceed that 6% by doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it will apply in apartments. So this is what I wanted to respond to your original thought. We can take a 100-unit apartment complex, and every one of those people can live in it like they own it. How much better would it be to have those apartments turning, right, and being taken care of, and a family of people, everybody in the building knowing they owned a piece of not just it, but all of it? Well, that's in Atlanta, but take it out nationally. This process can literally work in New York City, where nobody can own the property. No fund can manage it, right, if you're not an institution. But what if renters in New York could live in it like they own it and own real estate in Atlanta based on their rebates and their reserve that they put up front? So we see a national picture on this and being able to reach those million people very, very easily. There's a lot of doors out there. There's a lot of renters and a lot of people like us who invest in rental property who will do better long-term if their residents are engaged with them and live in it like they own it.
So I'd like to hear a personal story of somebody who was able to invest for their first time. This is somebody who probably didn't think, hey, I'm a tenant, I'm not an owner, and here I am investing. What was that like?
Let's take it to the lowest common denominator. And her name is being used with permission, Ann. She lived in our first property, which were 9 duplexes in Austell, Georgia, a little place about 15, 20 minutes from downtown Atlanta. 9 duplexes, brick duplexes on 3¼ acres. She literally, I think she pays $950 or $1,000 in rent. And she has built up about $2,000 in her account. And she's a video on our website, actually, where she says, and she's about 57 or 8, and she says, I have never owned property. I never imagined owning property. I've never gotten a rental deposit back. I take care of my properties, but there's always a reason I don't get it back, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, I already have real estate. As she liked to call it, I have a portfolio. I own a piece of a portfolio. And I now see this as something that, although I'd never be able to buy a home of my own with what I make, she's a hairdresser. I own real estate that if I keep building this up and keep investing into it for another 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 years, I will be able to hand this down to my children and grandchildren. Mm-hmm. And I never believed I'd own a piece of real estate to be able to do that with. Now, George, there are several good stories like that. One of the good things about this is the real estate she owns will never be gentrified. She will not be pushed out of it because generations of families have bought properties over the years, especially in Atlanta, that the grandchild lives in the property, doesn't have any debt on it, can't pay the rising taxes or upkeep on it, and ends up having to sell it. That's gentrification. Mm-hmm. Gentrification is about mixing the neighborhood. It's about kicking out the folks who can't afford it. And so we intend to, we don't kick people out who can pay their rent. We work with people who live in a property if we happen to get one that has renters in it, and some of them do. And what we do is spend the first 3 to 6 months teaching them how to live in it like they own it, showing them what happens when they build wealth, because they start building wealth from day one, even if the property hasn't been transferred to roots yet. The properties owned by seed that have renters in them are actually functioning under the same living it like you own it guidelines. So those people are building wealth in the roots fund while they're living in a seed property. So we believe that we can really have a significant impact socially while having a very, very good return. 15%, would that be a good return for our investors and the investors who live in the property? Remember, let's say we want to help 1 million people, and 2 funds in, we only have 1,400 residents. We're not helping 1 million people. The other people are those who have jobs that make 60, 70 to 150,000, under 200,000 a year. They're not accredited investors. But as an example, Fundrise, okay? Fundrise recently has had over 250,000 Gen Zers jump in because they want to own real estate. Totally different kind of function, Fundrise, totally different kind of function, but it's evidence of the interest level of Gen Zers and even more millennials to get involved in real estate, to own real estate, because they're learning what every other seasoned professional investor knows is that it is the #1 class of asset to invest in to grow your wealth over a long period of time.
Well, I love it. And so you reported earlier this year, I think you had about $150,000 in these resident investor accounts. How's that growing?
breaks 200 on March 31st when they get their
Exciting.
next rebate.
And so with 1,400 residents, then what percentage of your residents actually choose to invest in the fund?
Well, we're not at 1,400 yet. That's when we got 2 full funds going. Right now,
got it.
we have about 107 doors. So right now, some are being reconditioned and built and so forth. They were just bought recently. So there's probably about 78 homes that are occupied that people can be engaged in, and all but 2 of them are fully vested.
And great. So yeah, you can invest from the very get-go. Your security deposit, as I understand, that's invested in the fund, correct?
Yeah, we call it a reserve because security deposits are treated differently. And in our lease, it's called a reserve, and it's called your investment in the fund. And you make an initial investment in the fund that is leaned against you taking care of the house. Now, as an owner, contemplate this. What if you had a security deposit? Let's take the typical residential income property owner. They get a security deposit over 2 or 3 years. That deposit stays flat, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of 3 years, if you got $3,500 worth of work to do because they trashed the place, right? They didn't take care of it. You got $1,400 to pay it with.
Mm-hmm.
At Roots, as that account builds, 100% of it is leveraged against them taking care of the property.
Right.
100%. We have had only one person leave that did not get all of their money back if they wanted it. By the way, several have left money in as an investment, even though they left.
I love it.
The one who left and didn't get his money back, I can't describe the inside of the unit. It would be inappropriate to do so. But to say they left all their crap inside the building would be one part of it. But they left a pit bull chained to a post in the backyard. That cost us $1,500 to get that dog removed, right? So it's that guy had no respect for the process, and we were fine taking his money to help pay for what we had to do to fix it. But in every other case, we have had literally like $100 here, $200 there, where they punched a hole in a wall by accident or something. On that, they got all their money back.
Yeah, I love that. That's just absolutely heartwarming. And I love to hear that some people want to keep their money in even after they've moved on. And obviously this could be a route to home ownership, right? If you save, $10,000, $15,000, there you go. You're well on your way to having the down payment that you need to get into your own home.
Yeah, part of our educational process is the antithesis of what most nonprofits are trying to do, which is almost all of them are trying to talk people into buying a house with 5% down. We just don't think that's a great idea. If all you've got is 5% and you don't have any money to pay for the roof, the air conditioner, or the plumbing when it goes out, there have been many stories of those homes being repossessed. So you can, in a root situation, build up till you've got $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 to make that down payment with, and maybe even extra money on the sidelines to support you in that home when you live in it. And I actually just became a part of a whole group in Atlanta called House Atlanta. We had our first real meeting last week. And when I brought that concept up to all the people on that particular conference call, I said, all of you are approaching all the important things: down payment, helping people renovate homes that they own, all the ways that we can make things more affordable, keep people in their homes, or find people in homes. But what we're forgetting is we're still trying to convince somebody to buy a house who can't afford to own one. So let them build wealth and make returns on that wealth, and then teach them how to continue to save and build family wealth. And then at some point, if they want to buy a home of their own that they want to take the responsibilities on, they certainly can do that. And that money's sitting there for them to do it. They can buy one of our homes if they want to. They can buy the one they're living in if they want to. But at the end of the day, let them do it in the time that's right for them, not because it's some American dream that you have to own a home. Mm-hmm. To us, the American dream is to own real estate that you can grow and build wealth in and pass on to your family.
Well, that's amazing. And, this podcast is really about 3 things: entrepreneurship, leadership, and real estate. And you've really exemplified all 3. So I'd love to ask you a few questions about leadership. So as a leader, you have a passion for inverting the org chart and empowering the entire organization to execute as owners. Of course, that's not a surprise given your penchant for this impact investing, but what's your secret? What's the secret to creating that level of ownership among your team members?
I think the first secret is to invert the pyramid. First secret is that in the typical org chart with a triangle, all the bosses sit at the top looking down on their people. Mm-hmm. In an inverted org chart, all the people who are in charge of making the heavy decisions look up at their people. and they say, what can I do to support you? How can I get you the resources you need? What really is happening on the front line? Since I'm not there, maybe you could share it with me, and then we could decide together how we make the best thing happen for our clients, our customers, or whoever we serve. So it's a service mentality that comes from the bottom up rather than the top down. And it's not easy to teach in an organization. At APCO, we had 560 some odd employees. I can tell you the culture was extraordinarily rare. And everyone understood that the person answering the telephone, talking to the customer, was the most important person in our building. Not me, not the president, not the CFO, not all those guys with titles. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, there's a great book by the 𝐟𝐨𝐫𝐠𝐷 Institute called Leadership and Self-Deception. Probably one of the classified as one of the greatest business books I've ever read. And it really taught me how to think outside the box, my box of what I believe, what I think is, everything else, and always thinking centrally about myself, how to think outside the box about the other person first, how to really listen. And I find that it's not complicated. If I'm serving somebody, that means, and I told everybody at APCO, and I'll tell anybody wherever I'm at, I work for you. And so, they always go, hey, here's my boss. No, let's turn it around. Remember, I'm working for you. What do you need? What do you need to be successful? And I think it's about listening. I mean, we literally know at Roots what each and every one of the individuals who works with us, which is only 13 people at this time, but we know what each other wants. We know what our long-term goals are. We know what we're trying to achieve, and we have one set of core values that we live by and believe in. And when we are inviting someone to join our team, they get a real good look at how we operate and a chance to make a choice. Is this a place you want to be, right? And is it a place that makes you feel like you're included? And are you somebody who we feel like will fit into the culture? Because it's a lot easier when you, I don't like the term hire, when you bring partners on with all the paper spread on the table, all the cards open, face up, and then everybody knows what the expectations.
Well, I think that's a real beautiful approach to building a culture. And one of the things I probably should have mentioned when I introduced you is that I believe that your company has been voted many, many times as one of the very best places to work in America.
Yeah,
so that really speaks to
probably
it. People want
over a dozen years, maybe more than that. And we did external employee experience research. We didn't just do it internally and go, hey, everybody happy? Raise your hand. And I'm looking at you. You better be damn happy around here. We use third parties for it. And then we did go after those awards because I think they're important and they make everybody feel good. The other thing that I think is important when you talk about leadership and ownership is everyone doesn't have to be able to make a decision, but they all should be heard. Like making sure that every single person in your organization is in a very set standard meeting every week and is communicated with what's going on throughout the organization. So we use Gino Wickman's book, Traction, and his EOS system, and have implemented it. I've implemented it at APCO for about 15 years. So we brought it over to here, and 2 other companies I've been involved in are using it. And it really opens up that everyone has input. Everyone gets to say what's working, what's not working, what could be better. And then as a group, we make decisions, and I don't care whoever agreed or disagreed with the decision to start with or wanted to go a different way. Once we make the decision, we all agree, everybody made the decision. Let's go do this.
Great stuff. And now I know you're also involved in service. You got an organization that you're supporting because I said I would. And I did some research on that, and you've got some great videos out there. I hope people do go out and check. I think you've also got a YouTube channel to support the company, and you're teaching people the sort of self-ownership that it takes to become a leader, to take charge of your life, and to grow. So what would you like to tell us about that organization?
Yeah, well, I'm not teaching anything. 𝐿𝐿 is a superhero, and he's done about 5 TED Talks. Alex is a speaker who commands $30,000 and $40,000 per speaking event and gives literally all of it back to Because I Said I Would. He started it in 2015 in memory of his dad, who, as he says, is one of the great promise keepers of all time. And what he wanted to do was to teach young people in particular how to make and keep promises. I wear a bracelet that says Because I Said I Would on my arm. And I mean, you don't have to say much more, right? We all make promises we break, always, all day, all week. I'll be there at 5 o'clock. Don't worry, I'll pick up the laundry. Alex teaches people how to be more careful in the promise you make so you can keep it. And one of his TED Talks is about superheroes, and we share it with everybody who's a potential partner coming into our company. And we want their input on what they think about that, because what Alex teaches is very personal accountability. You know, to me, there's three kinds of accountability. There's top-down accountability in an organization. There's peer-to-peer, right? And both of those are important, but really no one should have to hold us accountable. We should be accountable for what we said we would do. If everybody did what they said they would do, how would your organization run? And so Alex I converted a lot of Alex's theory into business that we use in our businesses that I'm involved in. But in Alex's case, it's a multi-million-dollar charity that's just built an incredible camp in Ohio to help kids learn to make and keep promises, to help bereaved families get better. You can look it up at becauseIsaidIwould.org. And if anybody's looking for a charitable place to make a contribution, that guy's got all of my attention, I can tell you that. I've learned so much from Alex over the last 8 years, and being on his board is a real honor and privilege.
Outstanding. I love that. And it was really powerful to go out there. So I hope people do check that out. It's really great stuff. Well, all good things do have to come to an end. We have to start to wind this down, but I'd like to, before we go into the 7, I'd like to give you the opportunity if you had any questions you wanted to ask me.
You know, I love your podcast because it's quite different. It isn't always about how do you make your next investment, or how do you do, you know, you're digging a little deeper for pieces of information that the nuggets, if you would. And I don't think any of these businesses succeed without some of those nuggets. What is it that is your motivation for doing what you're doing?
Well, this has really become a passion project. The people that I've got to meet through this have just really changed my life. You know, a lot of people go out on 30-minute conference calls, and it's a great way to meet people, but there's nothing like a 1-hour dialogue like this, where I have the opportunity to deeply get to know somebody. And then later on down the line, I mean, I've got notes, and sometimes I go back and these are people that I'm looking to put deals together with. So it all comes back around.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, you ask good personal questions. You're looking for things that people listening can take with them. You know, I've spent a lot of time learning, because I don't think any of us knows everything, nor did I know anything when I started, right? So all you do, I think there's a really great Buddhist thought process that the more we learn, the bigger the circle around it is that we don't know, if that makes sense. So, you know, you keep learning and expanding, and all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, there's this whole other outer rim out here. And I put together a website called Share the Learning, because people I've worked with over the years, it's called sharethelearning.com. It's not nonprofit, but ain't nothing on there making money, I can tell you. But all that is just dozens and dozens of books I've read, videos I've seen that people are asking me either on LinkedIn or wherever else, what'd you read lately? So anybody who's looking for a great book to read, go look at Share the Learning. There's dozens of them, just fun stuff to find. And I love your mission. I mean, it's just fun to hear somebody younger than me by a long shot out there trying to share good words.
Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate that, and means more than you know. Well, I guess with that, we'll head into the 7. So this is really the most distilled wisdom, rapid fire format, 7 questions about you that's going to help our listeners find some guidance and new approach. So if you could be known for only one thing, what would it be?
Helping others succeed.
What is the greatest lesson in leadership that you've learned as an entrepreneur?
You can't be the boss.
What personal characteristic has been most pivotal to your success?
Compassion.
And then, here, I got to go grab my random questions here.
Yeah, by the way, I saw these questions and I wrote them somewhere, but I have no idea. So we're going through them again. That's all good.
All right.
I don't know how close I am to the first ones, but it's about right.
All right. So I got my random questions here. Just tell me when to stop cutting the deck.
Now.
All right. Right now. What was your favorite childhood meal?
Steak.
Oh, still one of my favorites. All right, now I usually ask to name a book that's helped to forge you as a leader and entrepreneur. You just named one. Is there another you'd like to name?
Well, absolutely. If you're going to read Leadership and Self-Deception, there are two more books to the group by the 𝐿'I'I'I'I'I'I'I'I'I'I'I'I'I'I'I'I'I'I'I'I'I'I'I'I'I'I'I'I'I'Group. One is called The Anatomy of Peace, and the other was called Outward Mindset. And I would strongly suggest reading all three of them.
All right, so can you describe a failure or misstep and what it taught you?
Can I get the whole list out for you? Because I would take, this is an interesting take on it. I would take the first 10 years of running everything in our business as if it was circled around me, and everything needed to go through me, and the org chart looked like a circle with a dot in the middle, and there's just too many entrepreneurs that do that. And then, so the one transitional pivot moment was truly reading Traction by Gino Wickman and learning to let go of the limb and trust people around us.
All right, and can you give us a quote to help forge our listeners as leaders and entrepreneurs?
Yeah, you can't ask more from a relationship than the time and effort you've invested in it.
Outstanding. And I'll share one more. This is how you close your emails. An organization succeeds not because it's big or because it's long established, but because there are people in it who live it, sleep it, dream it, and build future plans for it. So thank you for that. And I want to thank you for this outstanding interview, Larry. Thank you so much for taking your time and to share your knowledge and experience with our audience.
Well, thank you for the platform, George. It's a pleasure to get to talk about roots, and it's a pleasure to get to talk about all the other things too, because it's just fun to learn back and forth.
Thank you.